Human rights and democracy in Islam. In this project, I'm going to talk about human rights, Islamic law, democracy, and freedom movements. Human rights. What are they? Human rights are fundamental rights for all people, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or other status. Human rights include the right to life equality, freedom of slavery, freedom of speech and expression, a right to work, freedom of education, and many, many more. For centuries, in the Muslim world as well as the West, the controversy over the harmony of Islam and human rights has raged between theologists, academics, intellectuals, and the public at large. However, after the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this declaration declared that all people are free to be born and equal in freedom and rights. Every human being is connected to a center of humanity through common experience and common conceptions. Human rights are not subjective, but are fundamental from that point of view. The right to life, to justice, and equal treatment, to health, and to free the repression in a lawless state is universal. Universal rights are also applicable. The social contract between the ruler and the government and the people become meaningless without securing these rights. People may not agree what's good, but they agree that those rights are good. Although in different cultures, good and bad can be interpreted differently, the predisposition to good and bad is a cross-culture feature. There is nothing culturally connected in every period, in every writing of history, in every great tragedy in literature. In the great evils of human experience, retreated, murder and destruction of life, property, incarceration, hunger, physical misery and torture, homelessness and friendlessness without human rights, people have no status and become marginalized subjects of political system. Understanding the problem areas in Islamic human rights. Before reviewing the Islamic human rights documents that I have selected, I think it is important to comment shortly on the areas in which the most theoretic opposition is found with the introduction of our Western ideas. I do this because I feel that the basic human rights are formulated in UN documents, and the rights that I recognized in accordance with God's declaration on the Quran and on other sections of the Sharia do not, at the very least in principle, really vary. Islam instead has a very advanced system of rights formulated in its holy scriptures, as is the case in many other religions. Some fields, however, render it almost impossible to reconcile between Western and Islamic human rights, perspectives on tradition, or religious values. These areas will first be identified and will then be the focal point in my review of the documents on Islamic human rights. Number one is the inequality between the sexes. The most frequently described problem area in Western media is the rights of Muslim women, possibly because the contradictions here are evident and sometimes create a problem with Muslims incorporated into secularized society. The systematic violence against women is also accused in Islamic societies. The oppression of women was systemic and, in extreme situations, such as the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, equality creation returned to a prehistoric stage in the name of Islam. However, Islam's history isn't one of women's derogatory treatments. The Quran devotes much attention to women. However, Islam meant that conditions for women in prehistoric Arabia were greatly improved and their rights and status improved. Reforming such as the ban on female infanticide were initiated by the Quran, which was an important issue beforehand. It allows women to inherit, limits polygamy, and allows women to owe the dowry that had been given previously to the father of the bride. The Quran has not only abolished the practice of sexism against women in previous years, but also gave women rights in the 17th century that women in the West had only recently acquired. Muslim women already enjoyed full legal personality at the time of Muhammad, could own and manage property, and could achieve divorce on reasonably liberal grounds on some Sharia interpretations. Muslim feminists and reformists also claim that it is not fair to use the later understanding and practices of a religion which initially was aimed at eliminating the handicap suffered by women in historical Arabia as a way of holding women in a lower role, but for a society with a patriarchal family system that has different roles for men and women, and the man as the provider has a superior status. The Quran and the other part of Sharia was written. This view can be found in many faiths, including Christianity. The difference with Islam is that because Sharia plays an important role within the legal structures of several today Islamic status, at least in family law, It is possible to bring laws that distinguish between the rights of men and women. The way women's rights are treated naturally depends on the reading of the Sharia. Second problem area is freedom of religion. The question of freedom of religion is not so much in relation with non-Muslim minorities in Islamic countries, but with Muslims who may wish to convert to a different religion. Sharia forbids any conversion to any religion from Islam. The issue with the Sharia apostasy laws also has a large impact on the freedom of speech, as it can lead to various penalties if the authorities feel that they are contravening their official view of Islam. Third problem area in Islamic human rights are rights of non-Muslim minorities. Religious minorities in Islam can be classified into two categories: book citizens, اللي هم أهل الكتاب, Jews and Christians and others. People in this book were often permitted to keep their faith under certain protection if they paid a poll tax called jizya without intervention. This was a rather tolerant policy in pre-modern times relative to other faiths. Non-Muslim believers who were not from Ahl al-Kitab and unbelievers in the pre-modern Sharia doctrine who were to take up Islam or die. As mentioned before, Islamic law or Islam has three primary sources for putting law, which are Sharia, the Quran, and the Sunnah. The Sunnah has three types of interpretations, as the so-called madhabs. The first madhab is al-Hanifi, al-Maliki, wa al-Shafi'i. Now, Islam and democracy. In the modern world, the relationship between Islam and democracy is complex. Ideologically, the Muslim world is not monolithic. It provides a wide variety of viewpoints, from the ends of those who refuse to associate Islam and democracy to those who contend that Islam needs a democratic structure. Meanwhile, many Muslims claim that Islam is a support for democracy in several countries where Muslims are a majority, despite their own policy framework not being described clearly as Islamic. In the 20th century, several groups in the Muslim world which specifically identify as Islamists pursued active involvement in democratic processes when regimes in Eastern Europe, Africa, and elsewhere were overthrown. The relationship between Islam and democracy is heavily discussed between the people who identify with the Islamic revival in the late 20th, early 21st centuries. Some of them claim that democracy is a foreign term imposed on Muslim communities by westernizers and secular reforms. They also argue that the idea of popular sovereignty denies the Islamic fundamental affirmation of God and consequently is a religious act. Those who hold these beliefs are less likely to participate. Some are limited to involvement in academic discussions, and the media and others stand aloof from their society's political dynamics in the hope that isolated culture of the larger Muslim communities is somehow motivated. However, several influential Islamic minds and organizations contend that Islam is compatible with democracy. Some people claim that democracy can be regarded as a prerequisite of Islam under the circumstances of contemporary world. In these debates, the Islamic scholars put together historically relevant principles from the Islamic tradition with fundamental concepts of democracy known in the modern world. Some of them have the argument to say that democracy in the contemporary world can be regarded as a requisite of Islam. The Muslim world system is close to that of other religious traditions. The major bodies of thought, streams, and ideas that are important to understand human life and destiny reflect all great world faith traditions. In various periods of history, many of those essential principles have been used in different ways. For instance, in pre-modern times, Christian traditions provided a conceptual basis to divine right-wing monarchy. In contemporary times, it promotes the idea of genuinely compatible Christianity and democracy.
Now for freedom movements. First, the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Second, the Muslim Reform Movement in India. Third, An-Nahda movement. These are movements that aim for a better future to Islamic countries. In this project, I'm going to focus on the AIFD, which is the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. It was founded in March 2003 by Zuhdi Jasad. Jasad, a retired U.S. Navy Major General, was a medical officer for 11 years. Also, he was a director of the USS El Paso Medical Division. He was deployed for Somalia during the Store Hope, head of resident in Naval Hospital, and personnel of the United States Congress for the Office of the Assistant Physician. He has been awarded for the Medal of Meritorious Service.
Now I'm going to talk about my personal favorite quotes said by him. Quote number 1, we need equality under one law, under one God, under one reason. Quote 2, construct of the Islamic State or the Ummah needs reform, needs real work, it needs reinterpretation, it needs vision and innovation. Quote number 3, the Muslim consciousness needs a civil war of ideas between liberty and theocracy. And lastly, quote number 4, we have to break from the toxic ideologies like secular fascism and Muslim brotherhood to religious liberty. And thank you so much. That was the end of my project.